Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive macroeconomic mystery, and the prime suspect is probably sitting right there in your pocket. I mean, think about it. If you pull out your smartphone right now, you are literally holding more computing power than NASA used to land on the moon. We are completely surrounded by these breathtaking technological miracles. And the crazy part is, almost all of them are available to us totally for free. But here's the catch. When you look at the global economic data, something is deeply, deeply wrong. Traditional productivity is slowing down. So let's solve this whodunit together.
This classic paradox actually traces all the way back to 1987. Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Solow hit the nail on the head when he said, "The computer age is visible everywhere except for the productivity statistics." He looked around at the dawn of the computer era and realized that all of this hyper-advanced tech wasn't actually moving the needle on officially measured economic growth. And honestly, decades later, that paradox has only gotten stronger. We've got this unbelievable technology, yet our official economic growth just remains incredibly sluggish.
Which brings us to the central, glaring mystery of this explainer. If innovation is supposedly accelerating at warp speed, why are the world's economic engines seemingly running out of gas? Where is all of this human progress actually going? To figure that out, we really have to fundamentally rethink our relationship with those screens we're all staring at every single day.
Let's get right into it with part one, the productivity paradox, tech versus growth. We need to unpack the specific mechanics behind those apps you're probably spending hours on daily. So economic researchers have a specific term for these products, leisure-enhancing technologies. We're talking about social media, streaming platforms, free mobile games, the whole shebang. Now, the absolutely crucial word here is non-rival. What that means is, when a developer creates a new app, the cost of supplying it to one extra user is basically zero. You using it doesn't stop me from using it, and the transaction? It isn't happening with your wallet at all. It's happening with your time and your attention. Just compare it to traditional goods for a second. Think about a physical car or your morning cup of coffee. Those are rival goods. They need actual physical materials to exist, and you hand over hard cash to get them. Digital leisure goods, though, once the code is written, reproducing it costs essentially nothing. They practically give it away. But in return, they demand something that is arguably way more valuable than a few bucks. They demand your highly limited, totally non-renewable daily time. And the hard data on this paints a really striking picture. If you track the trend since 1950, you see the production of free consumer content just absolutely skyrocketing. But at the exact same time, across advanced economies, the weekly hours we actually work are steadily declining. And total factor productivity, which is basically the traditional scorecard for economic growth, takes a massive plunge over that same period. It's a direct divergence. Free services soar, while traditional work hours and traditional productivity just plummet.
So how does that actually work? Moving on to Section 2, the attention economy, under the hood. How are these massive tech giants surviving, let alone thriving, without charging us a single cent? Well, it all comes down to scale. By 2020, we're looking at 4 billion active users spending over 2 hours a day just on social media. When you capture billions of hours of human attention like that, you generate a highly valuable, albeit invisible, asset. In economics, this is known as brand equity capital. Make no mistake, your attention is literally the raw material being mined here. And this whole system operates on a pretty relentless 4-step cycle. Step 1, platforms hand you this amazing, highly addictive free tech. Step 2, you gladly spend your precious leisure time using it. Step 3, the platforms harvest all that time and attention. And finally, Step 4, they convert that harvested attention into brand equity. Think of it as supercharged advertising power. And they sell it to traditional firms who are desperately trying to grab consumer demand for their own physical products. That loop perfectly explains how your free scrolling turns into billions in corporate profits. But here's where it gets really interesting, which brings us to Section 3. The R&D talent drain, shifting resources. Building the perfect app to keep you hooked actually has serious, real-world macroeconomic consequences. Because capturing our eyeballs is so insanely profitable, the smartest minds on the planet are being pulled away from traditional innovation. Think about it. Instead of researching breakthrough medicines or engineering better manufacturing or, finally building those flying cars we were promised, brilliant engineers are being hired to optimize algorithms just to keep you clicking. It is a massive talent pivot directly away from the physical world, straight into the digital attention economy. And the numbers back this up in a big way. According to OECD data,
The leisure R&D sector's share of overall spending more than doubled just between 2005 and 2014. That massive shift of resources acts as a profound talent drain. It is quite literally starving traditional sectors of the scientific and engineering talent they desperately need to drive normal economic growth.
The climax of his whole mystery really comes into focus when you map it out over time. Economic modeling clearly shows that the explosion of leisure tech aligns perfectly with the drop in labor and traditional growth. And hey, this didn't just start with the smartphone. The data shows this dynamic really kicked off back in the 1950s with the mass rollout of television, which was essentially the original free ad-supported leisure tech. As TVs flooded our living rooms, work hours started a long-term decline, and traditional innovations suddenly had to compete with the leisure sector for resources.
And here is the staggering result of that multi-decade shift. Researchers calculate that the rise of the attention economy can account for up to 0.8 percentage points of the traditional productivity slowdown over the past 70 years. Now, 0.8 might sound like a tiny drop in the bucket, but in macroeconomic terms, that is absolutely massive. Even though the actual cost to produce these free apps is less than 1% of the total economy, their extreme non-rivalry means billions of people are using them, causing this huge systemic drag on global economic stagnation. This all brings us to a really fascinating crossroads. Let's look at Section 4, Measuring What Matters, GDP versus Welfare. Because if we are supposedly so much less productive today, why does our daily quality of life feel so technologically incredible? Why do we feel like we have more access to entertainment and connection than anyone in history? Well, the simple truth is that our primary economic scorecard, gross domestic product, or GDP, is virtually blind to the massive user welfare we get from free digital goods. See, GDP was designed to measure market-based production, things that cost money to make and money to buy. But because the production costs for free tech are incredibly low, they barely even register in GDP. This zero-price model totally detaches a product's immense personal use value from its actual production cost. You might get thousands of dollars worth of value from free communication, learning, or entertainment, but traditional metrics just entirely ignore the massive utility of all that digital free time. So ultimately, the productivity whodunit isn't necessarily a story of failure. It's actually the story of a massive, unmeasured trade-off. As a society, we are actively trading traditional economic output for free time, digital entertainment, and just immense digital welfare. So I'll leave you to ponder this final thought regarding your own daily habits. Are our classic economic tools like GDP simply broken and unable to measure modern value? Or are our fundamental human priorities just changing? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope you look at that smartphone just a little bit differently from now on.